We're closer, this is going to be beyond your mental grasp. Get closer. More like it's a cold day, staying closer together. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Yes, welcome to Her Majesty's Royal Palace and Fortress of Tower of London. I'm Yeoman for the next hour or so I'm going to be your guide, and together we're going to tour the fortress. I'm going to point out some of the famous buildings and structures. You're going to look at them, and I'm going to bore you to death with their history. Got that? Okay, look up there. Look back. That was Tower Hill. It's called that because it's a hill, but it's near the tower. Tower Hill was the site of the public execution scaffold, and I will forgive a lot of you for thinking that the Tower of London is all about prisoners and executions. It isn't. The Tower of London has never been a prison. It has always been a palace and fortress. What is it?
Palace and fortress.
Good. Glad you've grasped that. Unofficially, we had 3,500 prisoners here. 3,501 soon. Contrary to... Right, do you want to shut up now? Where are you from? Where are you people from? Australia. Be quiet. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you people, because you are a disruptive influence, right? There are people here who pay top rate to come here, and you're disrupting it. So you either shut up or you move on. Got that? Good. Right. Now, contrary to popular belief, we didn't execute all our prisoners. We only executed 363. It's not that bad. It's about 1 in 10. It's a ratio that's better than the current state of Texas. Now, very few executions took place within the walls of the tower, and I don't like talking about prisoners and executions, but I've got to. And this is the best place to do it because most of them took place outside on Tower Hill. But there on execution day, there'd be thousands of bloodthirsty people, not unlike yourselves, gathered around a raised wooden platform. We call this the scaffold. It's covered with straw, and that was there to absorb the blood. Amidst this would stand a man clad in leather, and a leather mask covered half his face. It's always been possible to buy this kind of clothing in London. I'm sure some of you know where. He was the executioner, and the tools of his trade were a block of oak and a war axe. It was considered noble to have your head removed with a weapon of war. Only the nobility would afford it. It was also a custom when the condemned man went up there to shake hands with your executioner and pass him a purse of gold and silver coins. There was religious significance to this, that your last act on earth was one of forgiveness. But in truth, the strange thing is that was how the executioner got paid. He was appointed by the state, employed by the state, but paid for by the customer. You might be wondering what would happen if you refused to pay your executioner. I can tell you that. Yeah, well, it is a slow death, yeah. James Scott, the Duke of Monmouth, famously refused to pay his executioner, and his executioner, Jack Ketch, just got grumpy. When James Scott stretched his neck across the block of oak, Jack Ketch brought his axe crashing down. Whack! Right through James Scott's left shoulder. Now, we know this detail because there were recordings, people whose job it was to write down or draw everything they saw and heard. Some of these records still exist in the National Archive. They tell us that at the 5th stroke of the axe, James Scott fell silent. A further 3 strokes of the axe, the head was still attached. So after 8 strokes of the axe, he put the axe down and took out a knife and had to rip through the last bits of flesh, bone and gristle. The head was then impaled on a soldier's pike, paraded through the streets of London and left on London Bridge as a warning to other traitors, and it also served as an early form of bird feeder. So it was environmentally friendly. Meanwhile, the headless corpse was brought back inside the fortress for burial in the chapel, close to where we're going to end our tour. Prisoners and execution is a very small part of the tower's history. My passion here is medieval defensive architecture. I bet you're really glad you got my tour. If you look that way for a moment, you will see the ice rink. If you watch carefully, someone will fall over and hurt themselves soon, and I find that rather amusing. The ice rink is not a traditional feature of medieval defensive architecture. However, what is remarkable is that our moat is wide enough to accommodate an ice rink. The moat is wider than most people expect because this is not Disneyland. This is a real fortress, and that's a real defensive line. The moat is 130 feet across, which was further than an archer could shoot accurately. Our archers on the ramparts could shoot anyone trying to cross the moat in relative safety from anyone on the far side who took a shot at them. Twice a day, the tidal flow of the River Thames would flood in, and ebb out. This kept the moat clean. Clever?
Yes.
Not really, no. At low tide, the moat would dry out. If there was an enemy, they could just run across. Complete waste of time. In 1381, we employed a consultant. Did what all consultants do. Took a barrow load of money, left us with a sentence. He said we should dig the moat deeper than the riverbed. He said it would never fully drain and always present an obstacle. Why we hadn't thought of that, I don't know. But that's what we did. Clever?
Yes.
Not really, no. The secondary function of the moat was that of toilet. 2,500 people lived inside this fortress and tens of thousands lived around the outside. Every one of these people, and most of them more than once a day, added to the contents of the moat. You do know what I'm talking about, don't you? Yeah, it doesn't always float. It won't float unless you have a high-fat diet. You know that? This is science, children. High-fat, floaty poo. Now you can experiment at home. Yes, yeah, with someone with a high-fibre diet, it will sink, high-fat will float, all right? Do it in the bath, kids. No one will tell you off, it's science. Really don't like children. Anyway, at low tide, the moat became little more than a mire of raw human poo. Carcasses from the meat market at Smithfield were also dumped in there. Plague victims were tossed in. We had everything in the moat. Typhoid, anthrax, plague, polar bears. We had polar bears in the moat because the Tower of London was the first zoo anywhere in Britain. It housed the royal menagerie. And we had a royal menagerie because the kings and queens of Europe didn't like each other very much, but they had to be civil. So they gave each other gifts. A bit like a family Christmas, really. Gifts that no one would want. 1326, the King of France gave us an elephant. Thank you. The elephant cost us a fortune to look after, and I'm sure France knew it would. We were given lions and tigers too. The polar bears were a gift from King Olaf of Norway. They were allowed to swim in the moat to catch fish. That wasn't all they caught. They caught cholera and died. So as a toilet, the moat was a complete failure. But as a line of defence, I think you'll agree, it did work rather well. But it stank, and this is a royal palace. You don't put up with a smell like that in a royal palace. The moat didn't last very long. Near 500 years later, in 1843, the moat was drained, was filled in about 15 feet, 5 metres to the height you see today, was then laid to lawn. Look how lush and green the grass grows. It is incredibly fertile ground. Now, the outer wall there, that was built in the 1280s. 2 strong bastions to the north dominate the approaches from the city. And there, if you're sharp-eyed, you will note that in Tudor times, they were modified to house cannon. Along this line, we have 6 towers facing south, and they defend us against any attack that might come from up the river. The Byward Tower there is just one of them, but that's unique. That's the only landward entrance into the fortress. It's known as a Barbican Tower. There are 2 turrets and a gateway in the middle. And as you go through the gateway, have a look up, you might notice the spikes on the portcullis, or drop gate. That drop gate weighs 1.5 tonne. It dates from 1286, and so does the rope which holds it up. So we're going to go through there rather quickly. The most famous entrance in the Tower of London, Traitor's Gate. Come on, the word was quickly, let's go.